Hi and welcome back to the I Hit Drums YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at drum-only patterns. So by drum-only patterns, what I actually mean here is that we're going to remove the hi-hats. Now when you're first starting out with drumming, that hi-hat provides you with a nice grid to follow. So all you need to do to read a lot of these grooves is look at one hi-hat, see what else is underneath it, do those together, move to the next hi-hat and do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So having that hi-hat there, whether it's an 8th note or 16th note or quarter note hi-hat pattern, that actually provides you with a nice grid to follow. But when that isn't there, do you know how to play those bass drum and snare drum parts? That's the question. And that's what we're going to look at today. So just to go over something we've discussed in the past, and this is note values and the note value rests for quarter notes and 8th notes. If we've got a quarter note, then that is going to be on a number. It's never going to be on an and. If we've got an 8th note on its own, then that is going to be falling on an and, not on a number. So this is on a number, this is on an and. Now if we've got a quarter note rest, then that is also falling on a number. So the quarter note or the quarter note rest both falling on a number, not an and. And that just leaves the 8th note rest. Now this is where things get a bit confusing, because an 8th note on its own falls on an and, but the 8th note rest is always before that note. So that 8th note rest is actually falling on a number as well. So of those 4 notes and rests, 3 of them are actually falling on numbers. The only thing that's falling on the and is that 8th note. So that's what you need to keep in mind for these exercises. Now we're going to move to the kit and give these a try. Okay, so now that we've established where the quarter notes, 8th notes, quarter note rests and 8th note rests are all falling, we can now use them, and hopefully you understand those a bit more clearly and you can read them with a lot more ease. So to start with, we're going to just do a snare drum line, and this is going to involve quarter notes, 8th notes and 8th note rests. So remember, the only thing on an and position is those 8th notes, the ones with a little tail. Everything else is a number count. Now this only really works in an accurate way if you're playing it to a metronome. You don't really have any real way of knowing where the quarter note is falling. So the metronome is going to give you that kind of stability throughout the exercise. This first exercise is from my book Intermediate 1. It's exercise 3.1. So first of all, if we look at this exercise, we can see that to begin with, we've got 2 quarter notes. So that's going to be beats 1 and 2. After this, we have an 8th note rest. We know that's beat 3. And the next rest we see is going to be beat 4. So we know that those other 2 snare drum hits in that bar are the and of 3 and the and of 4. In bar 2, we're starting with an 8th note rest. So we know that's beat 1. This is followed by an 8th note, which will be the and of 1. We then have another rest, which has to be beat 2, followed by an 8th note, which has to be the and of 2. And that leaves us with 2 more quarter notes, which will be beats 3 and 4. So I'm going to put on the metronome at 60, and we're going to give this exercise a try. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I don't know if you noticed there that when you're following the metronome click like that, you should be able to hear that metronome click where those rests are. So I went smack, smack, click, smack, click, smack. So let that be your guide. Let's do that again. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's jump ahead now in the book to exercise 3.2. We're going to take that exact same exercise, but now we're going to spread it over 2 voices. So we're going to be doing the bass drum and the snare drum, but the rhythm stays the same. We're just moving between those 2 voices a bit more now. So whether it's a bass drum or a snare drum, those first 2 hits are still quarter notes. So that's still 1, 2. We're only changing the drum, we're not changing the rhythm. So let's give that a try. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so this is really good for your reading. It's also really good for, responding very quickly to what you're reading. And if you increase the speed of that, that's going to be even more so. But to begin with, you're actually trying to improve your reading here and, strengthen your sense of these different note values and their rests and how they actually sit within a bar when that hi-hat isn't there. The hi-hat is such a guide for you a lot of the time. So without that there, you really need to know your note values. So let's try that one again. 2, 3, 4. So let's try one more example from exercise 3.2. This is actually the last example. And I want to do this one because we also have a quarter note rest, well, 2 quarter note rests within this example. So we start with an 8th note rest, which we know is beat 1, and that's obviously going to be followed by an 8th note on the and of 1. We then have a quarter note rest, this is beat 2. But remember, this is a longer rest, so that beat 2 rest is on the click, and the next hit that you do will also be the next click. We're not going to be in between a click for this one. And the rest of that bar we have beats 3 and 4, 2 quarter notes. The second bar is a bit trickier because we've actually got a whole beat and a half of rest. So we've got a quarter note rest on beat 1, and that's taken up all of beat 1, the and as well. And then the next thing is an 8th note rest, and this is on beat 2. So we're not actually going to be doing anything in this bar until the and of 2. Where we can see that 8th note on its own on the bass drum. This is immediately followed by a strike on the snare drum on beat 3. So we're going 2 and 3 with the bass. And then we have a quarter note rest on beat 4. So let's try this again at 60. 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'll do that again. I'm kind of illustrating where the click's falling there, where those rests are falling, I should say, as well, in relation to the click. So let's do that again. 2, 3, 4. Okay, I hope you found that helpful and that strengthened your sense of those note values and their rests, and now you're able to read some of those patterns without using that hi-hat as a guide to keep you going. If you'd like to try some more of these exercises, you can find them in my book, Intermediate 1. This is available on my website, www.ihitdrums.co.uk. Now, we only looked at a few of the exercises within that lesson chapter, but there's actually a lot more in there, so it's worth checking out the rest of that lesson chapter if you're someone who's looking to develop their own fills and maybe some drum solos. But until next time, enjoy!